This CyCast is provided to you by the Iowa State Letter Winners Club, bridging the gap between legend and legacy by engaging in our past to invest in our future.
Hey, everybody. We have a wonderful guest in our latest CyCast. We have former Iowa State head football coach Jim Walden, who was the head football coach at Iowa State from 1987 to 1994. And, during that time, Iowa State, has some great memories, some great wins, and we are really happy to have you here, Coach. Thanks for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today, Ames. When you get my age, Mike, it's good to be a pleasure to be anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, Coach, I'm gonna start really early, and I think a lot of people may not even know this, but you had a great college career at Wyoming, and then you went on to a successful career in the Canadian Football League at quarterback. And why did you choose to play in Canada? Because you were drafted by the Denver Broncos, but you went to Canada. Why did you choose to play in Canada?
Well, to be really honest with you, I wasn't a great drop back thrower, and I knew that. Most all the football I had played, especially at Wyoming, was all bootleg, unbalanced line, Michigan State, Duffy Daugherty, the old days. You have to look back at time, and that's why I think it makes it so hard sometimes for older guys like myself who played real good football at a time. But if you were a quarterback in my era, if you threw 15 passes a game, that was considered a tremendous amount. So you compare that to guys today throwing 55 passes and so forth and so on. So when it came time to get drafted, Denver was a brand new team. It was going to be their first year.
Yep.
They had their dressing room was in a Quonset hut. So I didn't think that was really good. And so what I did, I just looked at the Cleveland. I got drafted by them late, I think second or third, somewhere in there. And when it got down to it, British Columbia offered me more money than Cleveland was going to pay me.
Yep.
And so I said, hey, I'm just a dirt poor guy from Mississippi playing at Wyoming. Every little bit of money I can scrape up, I'm going to take. I thought it fit my game. The 110-yard long and 60-yard wide field was more conducive. And so that's why I made the decision. That's where I went.
Yeah. Well, after you had a good career in the CFL, and then after you got out, you got into coaching, which is obviously something in your that you had in your DNA all along. And then later on, you got on the staff at Nebraska with legendary coach Bob Devaney, and you actually won a national title on with that staff. And what was it like coaching with Coach Devaney?
Well, go back up a little bit. He was my college coach now.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
At Wyoming. That was my first connection. He brought me out to Wyoming from the junior colleges of Mississippi. It was a great experience for me. It gave me a chance to get out of the South. I wasn't running from the South. I was running to something new. And the Wild West, so to speak, rodeos and bucking horses and things seemed to appeal to me, something new. And so then as you said, when I got out of Canada, I went to a little town called Ames, Mississippi, to coach football. I didn't know I was going to do that, but they offered me a nice little deal of probably about $8,000 a year, I think. And that's about right up there with the NIL today, isn't it? And, and so he called me right before I started my 5th year. But he didn't call until about the 1st of August. He said he had a spot for me on the staff, and it would be like a grad assistant today because he needed to put me on the staff before he could hire me because he didn't want to make all the high school coaches in Nebraska mad. But he had told me before that he would like to have me join his staff. Well, unfortunately, Mike, I couldn't do that. I was only 2 weeks from two-a-days in Ames, so I turned him down. And he wasn't one of those kind of guys that liked to be turned down much. And I loved him dearly and miss him every day. But just to pick up the phone and call and talk to him. But he called me back then about January of that fall next year. And his first statement was, "Is this early enough?" But I had told him, I said, "Coach, I'm 2 weeks away from two-a-days. I can't leave this team now. It just wasn't something I could do."
Yeah.
It broke my heart because I'm like, wow, man, I'd like to go join the staff at Nebraska. So to make a long story short, I went to the staff. We won back-to-back national championships in 70 and 71, and it was a great experience of my life. It was just a beautiful time for me to be on the same staff with 4 or 5 of the guys that had coached me at Wyoming, and it was just a marvelous experience.
Yeah, and one of the greatest games in college football history was the game of the century in 1971, where Nebraska beat Oklahoma 35-31 on Thanksgiving. And what are your memories from that game? Because even I was like 1 year old, but I seem to see highlights of it every year.
Well, it was an unbelievable experience. Right after we played our last ball game, we knew we had 10 days because we were going to play it on Thanksgiving Day. So we knew we were going to get the open date, so to speak. And so as any enthusiastic young coaches, and Warren Powers, me, and Monty Kiffin, we're the 3 young bucks, on the defensive side of the ball. And gosh darn, we go in and we're watching film in those days and the tape instead of tapes. And right away we think, we can win this. To show you how it evolves, in about 6 or 7 days, the more we watched, the more it was like, oh man, this is a pretty good football team. And it turned out to be just that. It was more or less the I formation, power I, occasional mix in play action passes versus the wishbone.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be a tremendous football game. Very nervous, unbelievable attention. And just the build up to it was off the charts.
Yeah. Well, in 1972, one of the most famous games in Clyde Williams Field history was the 23-23 Iowa State-Nebraska tie. And, we've heard 100 stories from the Cyclone perspective from that game. Someone who was coaching at Nebraska at that time, what were some of your memories from that game? Because it's crazy what happened at the end with the missed extra point. And, and I think I was right that, that ended Nebraska's 24-game unbeaten streak in the Big 8 at the time too. What are your memories being on the sideline, on the opposite sideline that day?
Well, it's 2 things. One, it was a different field. It was up there, up behind the PE building, or the old PE building. It was the old field. So when I came to Iowa State, it had, that was just a field where the sororities and fraternities it was. And then, so we were all my careers down where it is today. And so that was wholly different, unbelievably different scenario, a different atmosphere in the old place. We were dirt lucky. John Majors and I used to argue about this all the time, but I knew he was right, and they should have won. You missed an extra point that cost you the ball game, and Iowa State did, and at that time, and really and truly, they outplayed us. They had some great players giving some great effort. John Majors and his staff just did a marvelous job of having them ready to play, and I don't know, maybe we just at Nebraska that year had run our course. We were just we weren't quite as good as we had been the year before, and it had been a struggle. We lost to UCLA opening game, and it had been a struggle ever since then, trying to get ourselves back into the number 1 spot. I just think we ran out of juice, and then they took total advantage of it. I'm sorry, looking at it from the Iowa State point of view, I'm sorry they missed your extra point, because I'd like to, I thought they earned the right to win, and they should have celebrated. They tied the game, but they really won the game.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you later went on to be head coach at Washington State from 1978 to 1986. Twice named, Pac, 10. I guess it was Pac-10 Coach of the Year at the time, and I believe you won 3.
Would you turn your sound up just a little bit?
Yep.
Okay, now ask me that question again.
Yeah, is this better now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you went on to Washington State 1978 to 1986. 2-time Pac-10 Coach of the Year. won 3 Apple Cups in 4 years. What was your, just your favorite memories of coaching there? Because you were a very successful coach at Washington State, had some great players.
Well, Washington State is so close. It is so similar to Iowa State. I never felt like I left one and went to the other. It was
Yeah.
they're both ag schools. They're both in a conference where they're never really appreciated, or putting it another way, they get abused a little bit. I used to make the statement all the time, and I don't think it was any different from going from Iowa State or what. You better not miss a meeting or you're going to find out you lost something.
Yeah.
We used to say, if you don't want a bad schedule this year, you better go to the meetings. Because, if you go back through the Iowa State thing, Nebraska, Oklahoma always was in the driver's seat. Oklahoma State tried to get in there a little bit, and then Bill came to Kansas State, kind of got that going. And then you add Texas to that, and Texas A&M. So you're always fighting uphill. The same thing was out here. You know who the big three were. It wasn't the big four when I was here. It was a big three: UCLA, USC, and UW. You're always going to have to work around things that you don't necessarily think are fair, but it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I'll never forget when I was at Iowa State, went to a meeting, and they were talking about the future schedule, and we're all looking. It was the Big Eight in those days when I was at Iowa State and first got there, and so we're all looking at our schedule, and everything is being based around Oklahoma and Nebraska. And I understand that. They made money, and we distributed it that way. But yet, in the end, you almost say to yourself, in fact, I made this point. I said, do the other 6 of us always have to grapple around and grovel a little bit just so you two can have that thing? Well, the response was, Coach Walden, this competition will go on forever. It's big. It's one of the biggest in the country. Well, lo and behold, it didn't go on forever. So when it went to the 12 and then Nebraska left, isn't it amazing how things that they will tell you will never last, will always be here, are changing? And that goes to the atmosphere that we have now. But my point being was that Iowa States, Washington States of the world shouldn't have to fight as hard as they do sometimes just to be recognized that they are just as damned important.
Yeah.
And that used to bother me a lot because in Iowa State, and so I went from one fighting battle right into to another one, but it's worth the fight.
Yeah. So in December of 1986, you were first contacted by Iowa State because they had a job opening. What do you remember from the first time that you started, receiving interest that Iowa State wanted you as the head coach?
Well, when Max called, I was on my way to interview at the University of Maryland. I didn't think I was going to take the job because I had already done some research, and it's one of the highest priced areas in the United States. And I didn't think the money they were going to offer me was going to be as much as I needed, and certainly wasn't going to be as much as I needed for my assistants. But at that time, I thought it would be good to interview anyway. So I did it, and I told Max I would stop at Ames or Des Moines on the way back. And I did that. And I really liked everything. The facilities were awful. But sometimes you just get beyond whether you have a fancy dressing room or whether you don't as to how it applies to your life. And when at that time I had changed presidents, Mike. I had my great president, Glenn Terrell, had retired. And I had a new guy out here, Sam Smith, who I like, but he brought in a staff that I didn't like. And I think on the other hand, they didn't particularly like me either. I'd been here 9 years out at Washington State. And so it came at the right time for me to think seriously about making a change. I like the atmosphere because maybe it's just the old, like I say, we've been talking about it. It had a lot of similarities. And so I made the change.
Yeah. Well, a little history lesson for Cyclone fans out there that may not know this stuff, but the previous coaching staff at Iowa State was under NCAA, investigation, and they actually had some NCAA violations that really reduced scholarship limitations. Were you fully aware of all that before you took the job?
No, I didn't. I just assumed that everything was. I knew Coach Kreiner and the boys had not done as well, but what I didn't know, I knew about the sanctions, and that didn't bother me so much. Um, what they did, they took 10 scholarships away. They only allowed us 10 scholarships. Um, but what hurt the most was that very year the NC2A voted to go from 30 to 25. So now I've lost 5 more.
Yeah.
And little did I know that he had a 26 scholarship senior class. So to make a long story short, I did not know that. I didn't know those numbers were there until after we took the job. I had my first uh, team meeting, so to speak, and we got the whole team in the Olsen building, and it probably wouldn't hold but 65 people. It was almost just an auditorium for the staff, not for the football team. And we realized then at one point in time, when we went out for spring ball, we had something like 40 guys on scholarship.
Wow.
And we had only recruited 10 players. And I'll never forget, we could have gone to Iowa that year and did go on 2 buses. I took 44 guys to the University of Iowa for the Iowa Iowa State Iowa game. We dressed 44 guys, and I think total numbers. I think our total number in the fall of '87 was 57 scholarship players.
Yeah. And
so I laugh and tell everybody today, Mike, if we'd have had the portal those days, I'd have been in pretty good shape. I could have brought in about 40 guys without cutting a soul. We could have kept everybody we had plus added about 40. But it was just tough times. We fought it. I'll always admire and love my players because they knew it. The guys that stayed with us, they played their butts off. They chose to come to Iowa State.
Yeah.
We didn't lie to them. We told them when we were recruiting them it was going to be a tough road, but we'd still love to have him. So I just think the world of the guys that we recruited and how they stayed. But it was a tough time trying to win some games with that limited number.
Yeah, sure was. And, I'll never forget your first win at Iowa State. And it was against UNI. And Iowa State was down 17 in the fourth quarter. And you guys came back and won. It still ties for the second largest fourth quarter comeback in Iowa State history. And I just remember because it looked like it was totally over. And I remember Dennis Ross going crazy. What a great receiver he was. And then you did the onside kick and got it, and you end up scoring. I think Jeff Shudak hit a field goal to win it. But what are your memories from that first win?
Well, it was just so exciting for us because, to be very honest with you, and totally, completely honest, I think we as a staff thought if we could play anybody within 10 points, we were going to be good. Yeah. And certainly Northern Iowa in those days and good. Still are. I mean, that was a really good, and we called it in those days 1AA. I think it's a championship thing now. But they had a heck of a football team, Terry. And the old, my mind's going bad. I'm trying to think.
Daryl Mudra.
Yes, exactly. And he did it. They had a nice team. And it was to us we couldn't brag that much about it because you're in the Big 8 and you're playing a 1AA team. But I'll tell you, that Saturday night at my house, our staff had a big celebration because we didn't know if we was going to win a game. And then to come back from behind, like you said, and to do that, it was just so exciting for us because we truly didn't know if we were going to be able to win a single game because we knew they were good. And we thought, well, if we can't beat this team, we might not win any. But we did win a couple more, I think. But it was a tough go, and they were a good football team.
Well, that UNI team actually made the semifinals of the Division I AA playoffs that year. Great team. It was a really good team, and they had a lot of talent. And fast forward to a couple years later, the 1989 team, still one of the best offensive teams in Iowa State history. I think you guys averaged 427 yards a game, which I think ranks 4th in school history still. I mean, that team was loaded with offensive talent. You had good players on the defensive side, too. But when you think about players like Brett Oberg and Blaze Bryant, Mike Bush, Keith Sims, Gene Williams, I mean, that had to have been pretty cool for you. Literally, like your third year, you guys had it rolling there.
Well, it's same old thing. It's still that way today. What's the first thing when you go into a program that's down? Notoriously, the first good spark is going to be your offense. I
Yep.
don't know why that is, but it's just so darn much harder to find those 11 great players on defense that can. And so we had good players. It's like you said, we had a great tight end. We were just really good up front with Smith and doggone it, man, we just had some guys that kind of blended with us. Keith Sims, like I say, Mike Bush and Gene Williams. It just kind of fell together, and then doggone it, we had a pretty good offensive football team, and just it was fun to see us get that far that fast.
Yeah.
But we just couldn't keep the pace of the guys on defense. We were still playing probably more walk-on guys that had been added to scholarships than you'd like. But it was fun to be able to at least prove that we could do some things, and it was a fun year.
Yeah, well, you went 4-3 in the Big Eight, went 6-5 overall, and I remember talking to you. I think it was like 5 years ago when you were back, and I remember you saying how much it hurt that team didn't make a bowl game, because we all know that team makes a bowl game today. It's not even close. It's obviously they're going to make a bowl game, but it did hurt you, didn't it? Because like players need to experience that cake at the end, that actually reward for playing well. And obviously back then there weren't very many bowls, so we didn't go to a bowl. I mean, how much do you think that hurt the team a little bit, because you probably should have got a bowl?
Well, again, it's back to the comparison of the two teams. I had a 7-4 team at Washington State that didn't get to go to a bowl. So in my career, I had 2 6-5s and 1 7-4 that did not go to bowls. I promise you, no football coach today can say that, because when you get your 6-5, or in this day and age 6-6 or 7-5, you're going to a bowl, and that's a good thing, because it really did hurt both the programs that I was at. Because what happens in those days, and you know it and I know it, you're coaching a football team that goes 7-4 and didn't get invited to a bowl. Guess what the recruits are going to say to every recruit you're talking to that someone in your league is talking to? They're going to tell you, hey, man, you don't want to go there. They can't even go to a bowl game with a 7-win season. So come to Cal, come to Arizona, and come to Texas Tech, come to Kansas State. So those are the things that really hurt. It hurt, but mainly because, Hoiberg we had a really nice team, and it would have been fun to have had it showcased, and not to speak of the good that it would have done when we were out recruiting, because now you flip it over. Had we gone to a bowl, you give all your coaching staff a whole bunch of positive things to talk about. Your players are excited. Everything was going to be made a little better because of that, and it didn't happen, and it was a real bummer.
Yeah. Well, you had 2,000-yard rushers in your career, Coach. You had Joe Henderson, who was a 2-time 1,000-yard rusher, and you had Blaze Bryant. What made those running backs so special?
Well, what was Joe's case, it was just toughness. Yeah. Joe he could play every snap. I mean, he would have taken the ball every snap. We had another young man, Blaze Bryant, was similar, but Blaze wasn't not as tough as Joe, but he was probably a little more skilled. Joe Henderson was just a tough guy. He took that football and he took the heart. And so he was, like I say, he was fortunate to play behind a pretty darn good offensive line. But take nothing away from Joe Henderson. He was one of the toughest kids, I think, running backs to ever play the game, because we didn't mind handing it to him, and he loved it. The more he loved it, the more we handed it to him.
Yeah. The 1990 team, kind of had high expectations, but unfortunately, we had some injuries early that kind of hurt you, and Blaze Bryant went down with an injury, which was really unfortunate, because he was an elite running back, as you said, and then Chris Peterson was quarterback, he got hurt. However, that 1990 win down in Oklahoma had been one of the most special wins you had at Iowa State. I mean, they were ranked, and you guys went down there. I think it was the first win Iowa State had over Oklahoma since 1961. And to win down in Norman, let's just put it this way: there haven't been a lot of coaches in Iowa State history to go down and win down in Norman. So how special was that day?
Well, it was unbelievably special. I have two memories. One that nobody knew about Friday afternoon when I got on the team bus, Mike, I was so sick. I cannot remember ever during a season being that sick. You just kind of like football coaches are just like, you're too busy to get sick during the season.
Yeah.
You just fight it off. But I got on the bus. I didn't even talk to the team. I just got on the bus, sat down in my seat, and almost like literally passed out. We get to Norman, and we're lucky because our hotel, we got there early, so a lot of the rooms were not ready yet. Mine happened to be one that was, and I think I laid down about 2:30, 3 o'clock, and I'm not sure I even got up. I might have tried to. I can't remember if I made the pregame meal or not. The evening meal.
Yeah. Yep.
I got up about 6 o'clock or a little before and walked around the motel because I was feeling better. I wanted some fresh air, but I was weak as a kitten. And so now we get to the game, and it's like we get behind, I think 14-0 right off the bat.
Yep.
But boy, Chris played great, and the guys started to pick it up, and of course that picked me up a little bit. But I mean, I'm still so doggone weak. But it was such a fun game to watch, and then to show you how dumb I wasn't thinking, and maybe I was just in shock that we went ahead 32-31 or something like that. Well, naturally, you're supposed to go for two, but I think it was either because I had been so sick or so weak or I was in shock. Both ways, I just held up one, so we kicked the extra point. So we ended up winning 33-31, and then doggone it, they missed a field goal, and we'd have gotten beat because of. Don't know if we'd have made it two, but It was not one of my smartest moves I've ever made. But it was truly one of the. I've never been around so many happy Iowa Staters in my life, and there's a big group out at the airport when we came back, and then I got to thinking and looking about, when you make that statement, there hasn't been many wins for Iowa State at Oklahoma. I always used to take one step further, and not a lot of other schools either.
I know. Yeah.
We're not the only ones. Iowa State's not the only one that doesn't win many games down there.
Yeah. No doubt. I mean, they obviously were one of the best college football programs back then, still are today. And it's interesting because I'm going to bring up Marv Seiler here in a second. Marv Seiler had a big play in that game, didn't he? Because you guys ran a fake, I think you guys ran a fake field goal or a fake punt, and didn't Marv take it for? I think Marv Seiler was a sophomore that year, and he picked up a first down.
We had a fake punt.
Yeah.
And we faked about 10 or 12 punts that year, and I think all but about two of them were successful. And so he checked. There was the stuff that hey, here it is.
Yeah.
You got to check it and throw it. And he threw the ball to Moore, and we completed a fourth down pass. He kept a drive alive.
Yeah.
And then on the winning touchdown drive, Chris, I think, had to check on 2 fourth down plays. He ran quarterback draws and kept them alive. So it was just an extremely fun game. And it was either the year before, Mike, or the year after they beat us 40 at home.
It was the year before. It was the year before.
Yeah, and we almost beat them there. Yeah. And we kind of felt like we could compete.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the 89 Iowa State Oklahoma game is a classic. It was 43-40, and I think that's, well, obviously that was that offense that that you guys had could score on anyone. So let's go to 1992, and it's still you have to say, if it's not the biggest upset in Iowa State history, it's one of them. And on number 7 Nebraska comes to town, and you guys beat them 19-10, and what makes that game so more improbable is that the circumstances of starting a third-string quarterback, fifth-year senior who had hardly played a down in his career in Marv Seiler. I mean, how much did that make that upset even more improbable?
Well, we always said Marv got a lot of experience, but it was all on the scout team.
Yeah.
But and so we go to the wishbone. I think we'd kind of been dabbling around with it, mainly because that kind of fit the personnel we had.
Yeah.
And Marv, thank God for us that day, kind of had been a wishbone guy in high school, kind of that option type guy. And so we just made a commitment to let him have it. We're going to run about 4 plays. We were not, if we threw a pass, it'd be a shuffle pass. And we didn't, even though he did complete a pass at Oklahoma, we weren't that impressed with Marvin's throwing ability.
Yeah.
But we said, let's just do what we can. And I'll never forget this. You may sound silly, but it's so true. Our offensive goal was to make a first down every time we had the ball. And we were laughing as a team, knowing that we were playing one of the best teams. I think they were ranked 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there. And so with our limited amount of players and talent that we'd lost so many guys, we thought that maybe making a first down every down would do 2 things. It would impress our fans that we could at least move the ball a little. Secondly, it would kill the clock because we're going to take as much time as we could. And that part we did. I mean, we didn't snap the ball, I don't think, a snap over 3 seconds.
Yeah.
But Marvin handled it. He handled himself well. He kept the ball when he should, handled it when he should. And it's just one of those magic days. And if you'll look back, Nebraska had beaten the tar out of Kansas and Colorado, the number 1 and 2 ranked teams. I think they'd beaten them like 106 to 14 or something in 2 weeks. So I don't think we had their full attention. And so it was a marvelous game by Marvin, and he did it well. And then of all things, for him to run like 75 yards or 60 yards, whatever it was there right before then got the go-ahead touchdown type thing. And but it was a wonderful experience. It was a great day for all of us.
Yeah, what I remember about that game was, when Marv had that long run, and then I think Chris Ulrich went in and scored, to put Iowa State up 19-10. I mean, there was a ton of time left in that game. It wasn't like that was like late fourth quarter, but like you said earlier, it was like you guys just managed the clock so well. It was like it would always be 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, and you guys always picked it up. You picked it up. I mean, somehow you just picked up the first down, kept Nebraska off the field, and that was like, I think people forget that was one of the big reasons why you guys won the game was how well you guys kept playing late. Even though you didn't score, you just kept taking time off the clock. Next thing you know, the game's over.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what was so fun about our game plan. Is like our plan was to cut this game in half. If you can use that term, we were going to make them have to work for every first down we could make was one less time we'd have to punt or give them time to have the ball because they were dynamic scoring. And so we said, well, let's just cut the game in half. Take all the time you can. We're only going to run 4 plays, so it doesn't take long to signal them in. So get in the huddle, stay in the huddle. Get a breath, and it worked. And it really started to work. We were leading 12-10, I think, when Marv ran the distance. Now we're up 19-10, so we know we've got a 2-score advantage. So, and if I remember, Malcolm Goodwin played a tremendous football game as a middle backer and just made some super plays for us. And boy, every time we got that ball, we just took 3 to 4 minutes away, and poor Tom just had to stand over there and figure out all those plays he didn't get the call.
Exactly. Yeah. You touched on this earlier, and I it's kind of a history lesson I want to, say to the younger generation. Like, they have no clue the difference in facilities at Iowa State now than it was when you started and were there. And I mean, just kind of sum up the incredible changes that because you've been at Iowa State a couple times in the last 4 or 5 years, and I mean, it's just like amazing of what you had to compete with and what they have now, isn't it?
Well, let me start off with this by telling you how bad the facilities were. We had a beautiful building called the Olson Building. It would have been nice if you wanted to put maybe there wasn't enough room. Today's football staff, size of football staff, couldn't have fit in it. Okay. The football. Now, the next thing you got to know is here we are in the state of Iowa. It gets hot in Iowa, Michael. You're aware of that. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
When you go back 1/4 of the way, 1/3 of the way in the Olson building, you had to walk down the hall and the doors were shut. The front 4th of the building were the athletic director and the coach's offices, all of them 2 in an office. Okay. From there back, now think about this. 1987, we're not talking about the 40s now. Here we're talking about 1987. The weight room, the dressing room, the training room, and the equipment room were not air conditioned. Now, if you don't go any further and tell you how bad the facilities were,
Yeah.
just think about living in Iowa as a football program, and the 4 most key parts of your team.
Yeah.
Weight room, training room, equipment room, and dressing room. It's 150 degrees outside, and you have no air conditioning in your dressing room. So that was one of the problems. It was probably, I used to say there's probably 50 5A schools in Texas that had better facilities than we did.
Oh, no doubt.
But it won't. I got to say this now. It brought me to believe that Jamie Pollard has got to be, and I would vote for him as the all-time greatest athletic director in history, because I know he came and did some stuff for Dan, and it was a wonderful thing that they improved from me to him. But what he's done from Dan to now for Matt is off the charts. Yeah. And I think the Iowa State Cyclone fans should never, ever forget who made this possible, pat themselves on the back, but at the same time, don't forget Jamie Pollard and some of the guys that have just been there, from Frankie Nogel and just guys who have really busted their butt to make Iowa State competitive and to keep it where they can do it.
Yeah, and that's 100% accurate, Coach, because it's, I started in the mid-'90s, and it's just night and day, and it's hard to explain to a fan who's only been following Iowa State for 15 years. They just don't understand, and it's incredible what Jamie's done, and it's been amazing, and I do want to bring up a story that happened in your career when you're in Iowa State. So it was early in your career, and I believe it might have been your first or second year, and that's when Visha was still going on, and there was these huge riot in 1988, and they had to call you out of bed to come down and stop the kids from rioting. Just tell me about that day and what happened. I can't even imagine. Like, you think about it now, if this happened today, like how big of a story this would be, that a head football coach would have to come down and stop a riot.
Well, and they also called Johnny Orr.
Yeah,
okay,
yep,
so
exactly.
I don't want to leave Johnny out, although he left me out, the skunk. So we go down, and the chief of police calls us, and I'm like, what? There's a riot, Coach. We need you to come down here and help us calm this thing down. And down at Campus Town is just ablaze, blah, blah, blah. And so I can't remember why it was all up in I can't remember what situation was, but it doesn't matter. All I know is that I got up. It's probably, I'm going to guess it had to be close to midnight. And so I got up, and he told me Coach Orr was going to be there. So we meet down on main drag of Campus Town, get in the police car and talk about what it is. And so I said, well, what do you want me to do, Chief? And he says, well, if you could just walk the streets and talk to guys, talk to the students. And I said, all right. And so I get out. Orr's supposed to go the other direction. And I think he did. He went down toward the business part, and I went up toward the frats and the sororities and all that way, and walked my way along. I guess it 2 hours, and it seemed to calm everything down. And then I walked back, and Orr was sitting in the police car, so I said, well, I'm going to walk all the way down the street. So I walked all the way to the highway, and just visited with people as much as I possibly could. I think it was a good call by the chief of police. It diverted the guys. It toned down their anger. A lot of them were there, didn't know what they were there for or why, but they just out there, you want to have a riot, let's have one. But I think it helped, and it calmed everything down, and it was flattering to us, but we could do that. But it was
Yeah.
also wonderful that our students thought enough of us not to throw us under the bus or something,
Yeah.
hit us in
Yeah.
the head with a stick. But it was then I got called out a second time, but I got to say, man, I'm going to start getting paid by the police force here if I have to keep doing this.
Yeah. Well, and you just touched on it too, Coach. Is that you had a great relationship with Coach Orr. You guys were friends. You got along, and I know a lot of schools that doesn't happen with the head football coach and head men's basketball coach. But it just seemed like it was a really fun time in Iowa State athletics. It seemed like the staff got along. You guys had fun, and then obviously with that very memorable Walden and Orr promotional campaign. How much fun did you have doing that? Because I have people still talk about that today, that they think it's one of the funniest things that they've ever seen that that you guys did. And I just thought it was really cool because it seemed like you guys really got along really well.
Oh, well, from day one, I just thought the world of Johnny Orr, and he was such a strong personality for Iowa State, and that high, shrill voice of his, but he just loved it. He absolutely loved Iowa State, and he transferred that to me, and so we just got along. We enjoyed it, and then when we started those Bartle and James things, I don't think we dreamed it would get to where it got, but my goodness, I mean, we must have done at least, I think, 4 different versions of that, and a big poster every time. I'd have to tell you that if I got $1 for every one of those things outside, I'd be almost as rich as Matt Campbell. I'm just joking, but it was an honor. But we would sit down. We'd go to Cyclone outings. In those days, you did all those. I don't know if they do them anymore. We'd have to do about, oh my God, we'd do about 25, and and we do 15 of them together. And so now when those things came out, the posters came out, as soon as we'd hit the door, it's supposed to be a cocktail party before we get to the program, you'd sit down and start signing those things. And that on any given night, you might sign 300 of them. It was a lot of fun, and it was very meaningful time for the folks at Iowa State.
Yeah. Well, you got the short end of the stick because your part was the speaking part, and Coach Orr's was the guy that was silent, right?
Yeah, but he was never silent.
I know.
He was never going to be silent. But we did enjoy. We even sang some songs. I think if you could, somebody around there's probably got a tape of us singing those Coney songs. Yeah. So they really pushed it, and it was a great selling point. They did a good job with it.
Yeah. Well, Coach, you had a chance to come back. Heck, it was 3-4 weeks ago, and you had a chance to reunite with a lot of your former players. And I mean, how special was that for you I mean, the one thing I noticed is that how much your players love you. And when we announced that you were coming back, it was amazing the turnout and of your players because they know what you meant to them. And how awesome was that for you to be back that weekend?
Well, let me back up to tell you what started. My son Murray started this because, unbeknownst to a lot of folks at Iowa State, I have 2 kids graduated from Iowa State. Yeah. My middle daughter Emily, and Murray, my youngest and only son, and his wife Bridget was on the gymnastics team, and so I've got 3 Iowa Staters in my family, and then. So Murray's got 4 kids, 2 grown daughters and 2 young sons. It's like a split family. So the daughters, one's out of college, works in San Diego. The other one's out of college and works in Austin. So we put this whole family thing together. And then I bothered you by letting you know we were coming. And so you did a marvelous job. And I want to compliment you for just getting the word out that I was coming. I know it was a pain in the tail to you because you also had the Hall of Fame thing that weekend, but it was just a marvelous time. So they wanted their children to see Iowa State. None of them had ever been back. He's got a son that's a junior and a son that's a freshman. Both of them are football players, but it just so happened that weekend was an off weekend for Lewis Clark High School. And so it just worked out beautifully. And there are times when you go someplace, you have expectations and they not too high and they don't exceed them. Well, I'll tell you something. We went back there with the idea we just wanted to see some players. I didn't know how many would show up. I would have been happy to see 2, but it just was a marvelous gathering with the guys. I didn't expect to see that many. I truly didn't, but it made me so happy. Bridget and Murray and Emily got to see a lot of the guys on the team that they knew. They got to see some friends other than football players that they knew. The 4 kids had a ball. And so I have to tell you, it was one of the best, I guess, family get-togethers through a situation. And then on top of that, we kicked Oklahoma State's ass, and that was good. Yep. So I just want you to know, and all the people, Denny Baker and the folks that just made it happy for me. It was great to see the coaches, Bo Bowler and John Fabris and Jimmy Burra and all of them that came back, Mel Sanders. I just don't think I could have planned any better and had more fun than I did about 3 weeks ago at Iowa State. It was just a marvelous get together. I want to thank you for a lot of it, for making it that good.
Well, thanks, Coach. It was our pleasure, and it was so great to see you and all your players. It was fantastic to host, and so we thank you for coming back. And and while you were back, you had a chance to talk to Coach Campbell.
Yeah.
And just tell me what you just kind of sum up what you feel he's done for Iowa State since he got here.
He's brought continuity to start with. He's brought competition. You can't call a coach that Iowa State's about to play. The first thing you ask him is say, well, what do you think about this? And he say, they're going to play as hard as you. You better bring your lunch, man, because they're going to be there to play. That is a tribute. That's a small thing to a lot of people, but I'll tell you something. When you're at Iowa State University and you are going to play them, you better know that whatever they're going to bring what they got. And that is such a compliment to a coaching staff, and the consistency that Matt has shown that he will play great defense. He will take advantage of the things on offense, and they're going to make you play the best football you know how to play, or you're not going to win. And I just think that's such a marvelous addition. Second thing, he has shown the people of Iowa State, I'm here to do the best for Iowa State. I'm not interviewing for every job that comes open. I'm not interviewing for every job where my name's thrown out there. I came here to work hard, to do what I'm doing, and I'm very happy with the results, and I'm happy that I'm here. That's what I get from him. I enjoyed my meeting, just chatting with him, because I was looking forward to it. It was everything that I hoped it would be. He's very congenial. He's very competitive. He loves what he's doing. He appreciates what's been done for him. And so I think the whole thing, you could not be more blessed than to have a guy like Matt Campbell. I think he's and I love his assistants too. I mean, he's kept them. He's made changes where he needed to, but in the long run, he's kept that good base, good solid, so that all the players know when they're being recruited, they know what's out there and you know what's coming. That's as good as it gets.
Yep. Well, Coach, I tell you what, I cannot thank you enough for having this conversation with us. It's so great to catch up with you, and you know that you're always welcome back here. Iowa State loves you, and I just want to thank you again. And you've been possibly one of the best conversations we've had in our CyCast so far.
Well, you keep up the good work. If you're doing everybody as good as you've done for us that weekend, I tell you what, Mike, you are a compliment to the university. They should be extremely proud they've got you, and it is a wonderful place. I tell everybody all the time, Iowa State University is just a great place. I love having been there. I love being a part of all of it. And everybody says, well, they fired you. I go, they deserve to. I needed it. But it doesn't mean I don't love the place, dumb. But I love being able to come back. I love my friends there. I had some of the best hunting and fishing I've ever done in my life there. And that was an addition to Mike. And so really and truly, in all seriousness, It's a wonderful place, and I'm glad to have been a part of my little part of it. And I'll finish this by just saying, go Cyclones.
All right. Thanks, Coach.